but instead it's time to do things a bit properly. So the short story, first definition: a prose narrative, shorter than a novel and necessarily more restricted in characters, in situations, in development, and so on. So a novel can develop a character fully. The short story cannot and does not. The short story usually focuses on a single aspect of a personality, a revealing moment, a key event, a revealing fact. So the short story usually concentrates on a single character in a single episode. Avevamo detto, banalizzando se vogliamo, sicuramente banalizzando, il romanzo è in qualche maniera confrontabile con il film, dove c'è uno sviluppo narrativo, eccetera. La short story è in qualche maniera confrontabile con la foto artistica. La foto artistica è un istante soltanto, un momento soltanto, non spiega tutto, ma alcune foto artistiche divenute famose alludono a, quindi fanno vedere un attimo, ma da quell'attimo la persona capisce molto. E quella è la differenza tra la foto artistica e la schifezzona che uno carica su Instagram perché ha appena fatto. Development of the short story. Because as we said, stories have always existed. Storytelling has always existed. Your grandmothers told you stories, probably. And also in literature, stories have always existed. In different forms, inside stories, digressions, anecdotes, sketches, tales, novellas, and so on. You find stories in the Bible, you find stories in the classics, you find stories in the Cameron, you find stories in the Canterbury Tales, you find stories in Cervantes, and so on. So telling stories is something which has always existed, both in life and in literature. However, something happens in the 19th century, and in the 19th century in America. The short story as we know it, the short story as a literary genre codified with rules, is a typical American product of the 19th century. And again, like other American things, it started from the people of the land. So in America, there were many periodicals, newspapers and magazines, also in the Midwest or West, and it happened that readers started to send stories to these magazines, short stories to these magazines, and these magazines published these stories which were contributed by readers. Clearly, this was something which appealed to the American taste for fiction, which was also short. The thing became so important in America that American men of letters started to observe this and started to study this and gave literary dignity to this. So American men of letters took something common people was producing and transformed it into works of art. In particular, two American men of letters were instrumental in doing this. One was Nathaniel Hawthorne, and the second was Edgar Allan Poe. Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote novels, as you know, but seeing what was happening, he also wrote short stories. And then his collection of short stories was published as Twice Told Tales. The publisher asked another American to write a preface, and this is Edgar Allan Poe, who in the preface to Twice Told Tales set up the principles of the short story. So the real theorist, the first theorist of the short story is Poe. Poe says something which looks simple. He says, the ordinary novel is objectionable from its length. As it cannot be read at one sitting, it deprives itself of the immense force deriving from totality. Worldly interest in the intervening during the pauses of perusal, reading, modify, annul, or counteract in a greater or less degree the impressions of the book. But simple cessation in reading would of itself be sufficient to destroy the true unity. So he's saying in other works of art are enjoyed without interruption. When you listen to a song, you are not interrupted. When you go to the theater and you see a play, you are not interrupted. When you read a poem or listen to a poem, you are not interrupted. Instead, when you read a novel, the novel is necessarily too long to be read at one sitting. Interruption is inevitable, and interruption destroys the unity. Every